Recently, while watching TV, I was wondering what is going to happen to my retirement nest when stock market drops like 2,000 points. I looked for sound advice in Nostradamus' book of prophecy. Actually, I realized in his 942 predictions, he wrote 26 predictions about plague. Plague? That's a scary word. Even when the virus now spread all over the world, few people dared to call it a plague. But look at the way it spread, the way it killed. What else can I call it? Chinese called people spreading bad news the crow. People with crow labels are often not welcomed in any occasion. Now, this can be harsh for people who already have few names on their list of friends. But burying your head in the sands will not help us. It is better to know and prepare than to pretend everything will be okay. I am about to show you what I found in the 26 predictions. Some are about plague in the past, but even that can give us helpful information in dealing with current crisis. Now, I may be wrong, and hopefully I am wrong on some of the horrified interpretations. But what I found is shocking, and I hope we can all prepare for the worst while hope for the best. The first plague Nostradamus talked about is Century 1, Quatrain 16. A scythe joined with a pond in Sagittarius, at its highest ascendant. Plague, famine, death from military hands. The century approaches its renewal. This is about a plague happened 2 centuries ago, and it is a plague that changed the world. Between 1889 and 1994, the Russian flu killed 1 million people, and its devastating effects eroded people's support of the Russians' monarchy. So as the new century approaches, the country is also changing. Now, why do I say that? Do you know that the old Soviet flag is the only national flag with a scythe? And the way the two tools joined, it looked like a Sagittarius sign. While the second line talked about a highest ascendant. Have you noticed the star on top of the Russian flag? And the Tsar's troop killed many protesters during uprisings, just as predicted. The second prediction is Century 1, Quatrain 55. In the land with a climate opposite to Babylon, there will be great shedding of blood. Heaven will see unjust, both on land, sea, and in the air. Sects, famine, kingdoms, plagues, confusion. This one is actually part of a cluster as the quatrain before, number 54. Century 1, Quatrain 54. 2 revolutions will be caused by the evil scythe bearer, making a change of reign and centuries. The mobile sign thus moves into the house, equal in favor to both sides. Did you see the word scythe is mentioned again? And the 2 revolutions are Russian Revolution and German Revolution. Both happened in 1918, and both countries making a change of reign and centuries. Reading this with number 55, you can confirm climate opposite to Babylon, and also sects, famine, kingdoms, plagues, confusion. Nostradamus tried to warn us about the coming disasters. The 1918 Spanish flu killed 17 to 40 million. World War I killed 40 million. But this is what Communist Soviet killed, based on their official records. According to USSR's official records, there are 799,455 executions between 1921 and 1953, and around 1.7 million deaths in the Gulag, 390,000 deaths during the denuclearization forced resettlement, and up to 400,000 deaths of persons deported during the 1940s. That's a total of 3.3 million. And that does not even include the deaths of 5.5 to 6.5 million persons in the famine of 1932-33. Pretty scary, right? So far, Nostradamus has hit 2 on 2. Now the third one is Century 2, Quatrain 6. Near the gates within the 2 cities, there will be 2 scourges, the like of which was never seen. Famine with plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief. We have been looking for these 2 cities near the gates for several years. Because the second line said it is a disaster of which was never seen, so we thought the 2 cities can be the center of doomsday, and last month we believe we found it. Wuhan got its name when the 2 cities of Wuchang and Hankou emerged to form Wuhan in 1927. It is ancient cities with many gates. This prediction is one of the many warnings about the current crisis. But there is a warning about Wuhan's future. Please note line 2 talked about 2 scourges. So far we have only seen 1. I think this is either a warning of a second wave of cluster infection or another disaster will hit the same area. The next quatrain I will talk about is Century 2, Quatrain 19. 2 hours before we started working on decoding this quatrain, we saw news footage on how refugee camps in Greece were burnt. Some consider this as a result of Turkey's new policy to allow refugees flooding Europe. Some consider this a way to scare refugees away when the EU countries had their hands full with the current virus outbreak. But this all gave us new meanings on this quatrain. Century 2, Quatrain 19. Newcomers, place built without defense, place occupied, then uninhabitable, meadows, houses, fields, towns, to take at pleasure, famine, plague, war, extensive land. In some other predictions we read, some areas will be deserted, and the deserted areas will have new residents. But I think the countries deserted the land would rather have the land deserted than occupied by someone they do not welcome. So the land will once again be uninhabitable, as stated in the quatrain. So the world would have empty towns and lots of land available, while no one can go and work on it. The next plague quatrain is in Century 2, Quatrain 32. Milk, frog's blood prepared in Dalmatia. Conflict given, plague near Trelia. A great cry will sound through all Slavonia. Then a monster will be born near and within Ravenna. 4 places were mentioned in this prediction. Dalmatia and Slavonia are in Croatia, and Trelia and Ravenna are in Italy. Nostradamus often mentions places like this in his predictions, which I have to tell you turned me off. When I saw these, I said to myself, who cares about a small town in a faraway place that may not even exist today? This can be something that happened 200 years ago. I have better things to do than worrying about this. Well, what a big mistake I made. If I had done more research, I would find 17 times Italy's city mentioned out of the 26 plague quatrains. Don't forget, the first plague predicted as in Russia of 1894, the second time was a 1918 Spanish flu, and the third one is the current virus outbreak, while the 1665 London plague was directly quoted. So, 17 out of the remaining 22. How can we miss it? Actually, we predicted that our doomsday may start with disasters around the Mediterranean, while famine and plague will happen. But we did not realize plague may be the cause of the doomsday. We thought of plague as a old-time quote that can exist in the 21st century. Now we know we were wrong. The next prediction is Century 2, Quatrain 37. Of that great number that one will send, to relieve those besieged in the fort, plague and famine will devour them all, except 70 who will be destroyed. Let's first look at besieged in the fort. Does that sound like a quarantined city? We know tons of relief material and personnel were sent to those cities in China, and many Chinese reported 3,000 of their medical staffs were infected. But Nostradamus would not be talking about China. He would talk about Europe, and the situation in Europe worse than that of Asia. As the prediction, plague and famine will devour them all, except 70 who will be destroyed. Is this a warning of another mutated virus that would be even more deadly than the one we are dealing with now? The horrifying prediction continues. Century 2, Quatrain 46. After great trouble for humanity, a great one is prepared. The great mover renews the ages. Rain, blood, milk, famine, steel, and plague. Is the heavens' fire seen? A long spark running. As plague, famine, blood, and steel mentioned again and again, you may feel this is playing on Nostradamus' broken record. But what other words can he use to describe blood, famine, steel, and plague? But this prediction offers something we have not seen before. The talk about someone who may be our Savior. He used the quote, "A great one is prepared." Well, you can imagine how troubled human desperately hopes to see the Messiah, and the way to save the survivors are to move them. In my mind, an image appeared. Because the virus does not like hot climate, people may seek shelters in hot countries, like Syria, Brazil, some African and Asian countries. But with limited resources, do you think people in the warm places will roll out their red carpet? If not, would there be more sparks of fire? Will this be again the survivor of the fittest? The next plague prediction is one that was generally believed to be about the 1665 London plague. This is what Nostradamus said. The great plague of the maritime city will not cease until there be averaged the death of the just blood condemned for a price without crime. of the great lady outraged by pretense. The only thing that connects this with London's plague directly is the mention of Maritime City. But I can give you 100 cities by the sea that fit that description. However, during 1665 London's plague, when 20% of Londoners died, it happened after Charles II's reign, who got his crown after Cornwall's revolution. His father, Charles I, committed no crime, but he was beheaded. Could this be the reason that Nostradamus called this the revenge of the death of the one with no crime? After Charles died, his Catholic younger brother James took over the throne. He was forced out by his son-in-law, William of Orange. Could this be the reason why Great Lady and pretense is mentioned? If my guesses were right, the mention of these history facts pinpoints to the time and location of this plague. And if so, he did do a pretty good job. The next prediction is Century 2, Quatrain 56. One whom neither plague nor steel know how to finish. Death on the summit of the hills, struck from the sky. The abbot will die when he will see ruined those of the wreck wishing to seize the rock. This is a very interesting prediction, as it seemed to talk about someone who survived both the plague and the conflicts, someone who may have a religious title or background. And I think he would try to rebuild the devastated Mediterranean from the ruined Gibraltar, which is called the Rock. Then, on Century 2, Quatrain 65, another possible future disaster is mentioned. The sloping park, great calamity, to be done through Hesperia and Insubria. The fire in the ship, plague and captivity. Mercury in Sagittarius. Saturn will fade. We once thought about this regarding the Yellowstone volcano eruption as the word park is mentioned, especially when Hesperia is also mentioned, and that being in California. However, Hesperia is the ancient name of Italy, and Insubria is also a city in Italy. So I have to say this is again a warning about Italy. There will be fire during the chaotic quarantine. Now, people forced to stay indoor felt like prisoners, and tourist places became ghost towns. That's what the sloping park great calamity means. I even wonder if the sloping park is the misspelled shopping park, as the Italian government just announced the closure of all retail centers. More horrifying predictions can be found on the next warning, that being Century 3, Quatrain 19. In Lucca, it will come to rain blood and milk, shortly before a change of praetor. Great plague and war, famine and drought will be made visible, far away where their prince and rector will die. The prediction starts by mentioning Lucca, which is another Italian town. Praetor is an under-council, which I think is to tell us who some government officials swiftly blame by guilt their subordinates. I believe this will be seen all over the world. The central government can accuse the local government for not doing enough. The local can blame the federal for not sending aids. And the result is what Nostradamus said in line 3. He said, "Great plague and war, famine and drought will be made visible." What will be visible? The human weakness? the nature of protecting only one's interests. And this also may lead to the collapse of two cornerstones of our society: authority and religion. Prince is the symbol of class and rights, while praetor is a man of God. When you see no future, having no money, getting no help from the government you pay tax to, and receive no relief from the divine, what do you think will happen next? The collapse of our society, order, and morale. The next warning is about Nostradamus' home, France. Century 3, Quatrain 56. Montauban, Nimes, Avignon, and Béziers. Plague, thunder, and hail in the wake of Mars. Of the Paris Bridge, Lion's Wall, Montpellier. After 673 pairs. The first line gave 3 locations in France. The second line talked again about plague and extreme weather. The third line, Paris, Lyon, and Montpellier, is mentioned. A number is also mentioned, 607. I think there will be a milestone when France's death toll reaches 607. Scores means gaining ground, so the French government would be powerless till it advances in 3 eras, both in pairs. My bold prediction will be quarantine, treatment, and prevention. The next prediction. Century 3, Quatrain 84. The great city will be thoroughly desolated. Of the inhabitants, not a single one will remain there. Wall, sex temple, and virgins violated through sword, fire, plague. People will die. My first puzzle is about the great city. Many cities consider themselves great, which makes my web search very challenging. However, one city does stand out, and it is considered by many the great city. And it is in the middle of the worst modern-day virus outbreak. That city is the Vatican. It can be the city in the warning because the name Virgin is violated. The Vatican has only about 800 residents, so if there is an outbreak, all of them may leave the city-state. As stated in line 1 and 2, it is surrounded by walls and probably the only city in the world that is surrounded by a wall. And when it is desolated, the wall may be violated. And it also is a temple, with the Virgin Mary being worshipped there. And very strangely, the word sex is found there. But my research led me to find that the Vatican has a 5.5% female population, which includes a Polish translator who is married to a Swiss guard, an electrician's daughter, and several nuns. Just based on that number, can you say sex was already violated before any virus outbreak? And the last line, through sword, fire, plague, people will die. Do you know Vatican's flag includes 2 swords? Will people try to break into the desolated city and burn it down? Is it a dreadful scene? But if this prediction is correct, and our decoding is true, then we will soon know. But this can also mean Haiti, because I can't think of a reason. Cannon is to be used on Vatican, because no one makes cannon anymore. But Haiti's flag has both cannon and sword kind of weapons. It is right next to the Virgin Island. So this can mean that area. The next plague prophecy is Century 4, Quatrain 30. 11 more times the moon the sun will not want. all raised and lowered by degree, and put so low that one will stitch little gold, such that after the famine plague, the secret is uncovered. Now this quatrain gave out a lot of information, but it is very hard to put together. I came up with this interpretation. Let's see if you buy it. The sun and moon raised and lowered by degree means it's about the eclipse. 11 times means from the time when the outbreak is known to us till the 11th time we have solar or lunar eclipse. Famine and plague will be over because the word after was used. A big secret will be uncovered. If the first eclipse after the outbreak is December 26, 2019 solar annular eclipse, with 6 in 2020, 4 in 2021, the 11th eclipse is a total solar eclipse on December the 4th, 2021. Maybe that will be when the worst of the outbreak is over, and a big secret will then be revealed. Then, in Century 4, Quatrain 48, it gave out more warnings. The fertile, spacious Ausonian plain will produce so many gadflies and locusts. The solar brightness will become clouded, all devoured, great plague to come from them. The Ausonian plain in line 1 is the ancient name of Lower Italy, and the second line talked about locusts. Now we all know the so-called locust plague threatened to wipe out crops in Africa, then in India, and maybe China. But from this quatrain, Europe won't be spared either. Actually, my research led me to find more information we did not know on the locust disaster. People said EU's NGO caused Africa's locust plague. How? Because EU banned all harmful pesticide, so locusts got a break. And we are now faced with an outbreak of locusts. As line 4 predicted, all devoured, great plague to come from them. After this is Century 4, Quatrain 90. The two armies will be unable to unite at the walls. In that instant, Milan and Pavia to tremble. Hunger, thirst, doubt will come to plague them very strongly. They will not have a single morsel of meat, bread, or victuals. As we all know, Milan is the hardest hit area in Italy, and the hardest hit part of Milan is its wealthy Lombardy. As of March 11th, 2020, already 617 have died. Can you believe this is foreseen by Nostradamus 500 years ago, calling Milan and Pavia to tremble? Search Pavia and you will find it. It is a town and a commune of southwestern Lombardy in northern Italy. Now, line 3 talked about the plague, and line 4 talked about the famine, quoting, "They will not have a single morsel of meat, bread, or victuals." Now, the next quatrain is a stern warning, but decoding can be challenging in many ways. Century 5, Quatrain 49. Not from Spain, but from ancient France, will one be elected for the trembling bark? To the enemy will a promise be made, he who will cause a cruel plague in his realm. This has not yet happened, but which realm would have a cruel plague? We know plague as plague. Why would it be cruel? I think it meant it was made worse for wrong actions taken by leaders. There are 3 leaders of 3 huge countries that are on the top of my list. The first line, not from Spain but from ancient France, I thought this may mean heritage. As French president is most likely to be French, Italian prime minister is most likely to be Italian, there is no need to say this. and the leaders must be elected and must have great power. And the country they lead, most likely, is a country made of immigrants. So, my three countries are Canada, United States, and Australia. I traced Australian heritage all the way to a convict named William Robert in 1788, but I found no trace of any French blood. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, he is predominantly Scottish and French-Canadian. So we definitely cannot rule him out. But how about President Trump? President Trump's heritage is German and Scottish. But when I searched the name Trump in Wikipedia, I found the English surname is derived from an old French word trompier, or trumpeter. Although I believe President Trump is the German surname of Trump, but the mention of Old French grabbed my attention, and I have to say, I cannot rule this out. For an ancient Frenchman like Nostradamus, the name Trump is a word in ancient French. And then there's the trembling bark, which sounded like a shaking tree. Did you know that Trump talked about shaking the tree in 2018 during the North Korea crisis? It became one of his famous phrases. The next shockingly accurate prediction is Century 5, Quatrain 63. From the vain enterprise, honor, and undue complaint, boats tossed about among the Latins, cold hunger waves, not far from the Tiber, the land stained with blood, and diverse plagues will be upon mankind. When I first read about this in 2018, I instantly believed this will happen soon because it is grouped with a bunch of current event quatrains. And it may be the Doomsday Quatrain because it talked about, and I quote, "and diverse plagues will be upon mankind." We were so concerned that we released the Doomsday Plague is here now. But we cannot understand why Latin and boats were mentioned, as I thought the refugees flooded Europe are not Latino. And while Latinos cross the U.S. southern border, they do not use boats. I realized what this quatrain really means when the corona outbreak started on the Diamond Princess a month ago. Can you deny passengers and crews on these two princess ships suffered cold, hunger, and wave there are not so far from land, but stained with blood? They showed how this new and different plague can certainly change our lives. But why is Latin mentioned here? Both princess boats are registered in Bermuda, a place considered part of Latin America. And what messages are hidden in the first line? Vain enterprise? Honor? Vain means useless, and that is a good way to describe how the cruise company dealt with this crisis. How do you call a princess your honor, right? The word Tiber can only mean the Tiber River, which is the third longest river in Italy. So it is telling us the next area to hit after the two princess ships. Then Nostradamus gave us another warning about the next country to fall in this plague, Greece. Century 5, Quatrain 90. In the Cyclades, in Perinthus and Larissa, in Sparta and the entire Peloponnesus, very great famine plagued through false dust. 9 months it will last, and throughout the entire peninsula. In the first line, the first and third cities are in Greece, while the second one is in Turkey. In the second line, both cities are in Greece. This prediction is very precise. It not only explains the plague will cause famine with false dust, and it will also cover the entire peninsula and last 9 months. Then comes a warning of a different disaster. In a short time, the temples with colors of white and black of the two intermixed, red and yellow ones, will carry off theirs from them. Blood, land, plague, famine, fire, extinguished by water. I don't know what the colors mean, but a quote of fire and then extinguished by water? Is this a warning of fire and then flood? When people felt hopeless, they can do crazy things. Killing, robbing, arson. It is a scene I do not want to ever see. Century 6, Quatrain 47. This a warning about Belgium. The two great ones assembled between two mountains will abandon their secret quarrel. Brussels overcome by Langres to execute their plague at Malines. So this quatrain mentions both Brussels and Malines, which are in Belgium, and then Langres, which is in France. People often refer to the EU as Brussels, as that is where EU's headquarters are. So this can mean quarrel within EU. Then Nostradamus warned against on Italy. Century 7, Quatrain 6. Naples, Palermo, and all of Sicily will be uninhabited through barbarian hands. Corsica, Salerno, and the island of Sardinia. Hunger, plague, war, the end of extended evils. The first line talked about 3 Italian cities, and the second line stated clearly that those will be uninhabited through barbarian islands. And line 3 gave us another 3 Italian cities. And then line 4 talks about hunger, plague, war, and the end of extended evils. Then comes another warning. Century 8, Quatrain 17. The United Kingdom. Those at ease will suddenly be cast down. The world put into trouble by 3 brothers. Their enemies will seize the marine city. Hunger, fire, blood, plague, all evils doubled. To solve this puzzle, we need to find out who the 3 brothers may be. Now, the most famous of 3 brothers might very well be JFK, RFK, and Ted Kennedy. But they all died, and there was no plague during their time. Now, Queen Elizabeth has 3 sons and that are in trouble all the time, but the royal-sized trouble had little global impact. And then North Korea, they had 3 brothers. But after the youngest killed his big brother, there are only 2 left. And the world did not get into much trouble over that. Could the 3 brothers be the 3 knights riding 3 doomsday horses? But I never heard about their enemy to seize the marine city. Or can we say the 3 brothers are the 3 islands in UK, those being England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland? They seem to be away from the outbreak center, but when it's spread over there, their ease can be cast down suddenly. Nostradamus also talked about London as the marine city, so I think this is to say when plague overtakes the UK, the 3 brothers would have some big conflicts among themselves, and this will make their common enemy the winder of the conflict and overtakes the marine city of London. And who will their enemy be? The virus. Century 8, Quatrain 50. Nostradamus warns about Spain in the next quatrain. The plague around Capulatus, another famine is near to Sagunto. The nightly bastard of the good old man, will cause the great one of Tunis to lose his head. The cities mentioned are all in Spain, but could this be about the 1918 Spanish flu? Very unlikely, so I will not talk about this much. Century 9, Quatrain 91. The horrible plague, Perinthus and Nicopolis. The peninsula and Macedonia will it fall upon. It will devastate Thessaly and Amphipolis. An unknown evil, and from Anthony, refusal. The first city in first line is in Turkey, and the second in Greece. Then it talked about the peninsula and Macedonia will fail, followed by mentioning about Greece and how it will be devastated. And the last line talked about an unknown evil. Could this mean that some countries will refuse to help? Because it talked about Anthony's refusal. Okay, this is a very long analysis, although I tried to be as short as possible. But there are 26 predictions with the word plague, and I don't think I can convince anyone if I just pick and choose on what I want to decode. We all know the challenges in front of us is unseen. Can we survive? I think the answer will not be yes or no, but how?